Okay, this is Jeff again with my bucket of grace here and my uh, cross to Christ, salvation through Christ, access to God through Christ. So I'm just going to talk about a little ideal that I hear all the time that is just it's a misunderstanding of what grace is that just annoys me and can't stop everybody that says it. They're well-meaning when they say it. So people are always talking about you need to show grace to a certain person. So someone talked to me one time, well, many times, and they've told me, Jeff, you need to show more grace to people who don't Bible the way, which I wouldn't, we're talking about people that I would say are false teachers or false prophets,
presenting false ideals about the Bible. So I'm supposed to show them more grace. You need to be more gracious. And so they've, said like, well, for someone that talks about grace all the time, you don't show any grace to anybody. In other words, your lifestyle is contradicting what you say. And this ideal also, I just Bible study was on the other day, and I was just talking. I need to show more grace to some person, and I need to. So this ideal of a person showing grace, a Christian showing grace to another person, is impossible in the definition of the ideal of grace in the Bible. So it's just what it does. It bolsters this ideal, which is not true. It's a misunderstanding of what grace is, and that is overlooking people's flaws, faults, or in my case, it's usually their ideologies. I overlook other people's faults. I am completely, in my old nature, I am completely and utterly flawed. There's nothing natural about me that's not flawed. I'm flawed in flawed in my mind, my attitudes, my body, my everything, my mind. There's nothing that I'm not flawed in, as is every other person. So for someone to say that this person here is not living up to whatever, well, guess what? You're doing the same thing or something else that is probably horrendously worse. But this ideal of showing grace to another person. All through our videos, we've tried to show that grace is access to God and God giving these attributes: salvation, righteousness, sanctification, holiness, love, joy, peace, the gifts of the Spirit, teaching, administration, helping other people. And they all work towards the final goal is love, being able to love people unselfishly. That's the final goal of grace. And it's a process called the sanctification process. And how you get it is you've got to get a lot of this in you. The more of this gets in you, the more grace you have. But you have to make room for grace. There's got to be something out of you. You're already full of yourself. That self's got to go so grace can come into your life. So I cannot show anybody grace. I cannot give anyone salvation. I can't make anybody stop being angry. I can't bring peace to anyone's soul. I can't give a gift of the Spirit to anyone. So when people say show grace, what they mean is the worldly definition of grace is to be gracious to someone, just to say, oh, I'm going to overlook that because you've got flaws and that you're seeing there's some flaws that you have that you don't see, and I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. I'm going to be gracious to you and just say, I'll just overlook that.
and we're calling that grace in a Christian setting. It's not. I can't show grace to anyone, and no one can show the grace of God to anyone. So when people come to me and say, you're not being very gracious when you say, this teacher is a false teacher, this ideology is wrong. Well, I've tried to compare it to the Word of God, and if the source, it's very easy to find a false teacher. If the source is not grace through Christ, that's a false teaching. It's originating from a person's personal strengths. So someone will have a personal strength, and they will turn that into a methodology, and then they say, we can get to God, the gifts and character and the things of God through this methodology that I've discovered because I'm an expert in the brain, in the past, in psychology, in using my willpower, in having the perfect attitude, and it's just on and on and on. Whatever a person's good at, that's what they became an expert and a teacher on. None of them are grace. And also grace is not just saying, hey, I'm going to overlook that. We do overlook things, and I do overlook things because I'm guilty as anyone else of things. But I cannot show grace to a person, not the grace of God. So it's confusing. It confuses people. And it was confusing to this person who's a pastor who told me, you're not showing grace to people. You talk about grace all the time, but you don't show grace to people. Well, it's two completely different subjects. The grace of a human grace is being gracious, overlooking faults, and godly grace, the grace of God, is this ideal. I can point to it. I cannot give it to anyone. I cannot. I'm not qualified to give the grace of God to any person who just point to the grace of God. So there we go. Please don't say, if you're a Christian, please don't just say, I'm showing grace to a person. No, you're not. You're forgiving them like you've been forgiven. It's a different idea. Okay, that was very, hopefully, painless.